Hey everyone, welcome to week 8 of the college football season. My name is Mike Browning. I'm the host of the college football road trip at cfbroadtrip.com, and we are about to go on the road again for our second trip of the year. We will be heading to Charlotte, North Carolina for Thursday night's game between Florida Atlantic and the Charlotte 49ers. So we'll get to that pick at the end. I'm excited to be on the road in Charlotte and check out everything that's there. What a great week of week 7 games with Iowa going down to Purdue, Oklahoma looking like a much better team with Caleb Williams there. The shakeup is continuing to happen as we go through the season. With all that said, from a slate standpoint, week 8 is pretty weak as far as there's no top 25 head-to-head matchup this week. But what that means is that this week is capable of a lot of possible upsets. So let's take a look at this week's picks. We're going to start off with a game out of the Mountain West. We have Nevada traveling to Fresno State. Fresno State's kind of a hard team to pin down. They have a big win over UCLA, but also have a couple of really confusing losses, including one to Hawaii. Nevada's had a pretty strong season so far this year as well, but because Fresno State's the home team in this one, I'm going to go ahead and give the edge to them in this matchup. So I have Fresno State winning at home over Nevada in Mountain West play. Next, let's go to the Big Ten. We have an interesting matchup between Maryland traveling to Minnesota. Minnesota is a team that struggled at the beginning of the year with a couple losses they probably shouldn't have lost, but they've looked a lot better over the past 2 to 3 weeks. On the flip side, Maryland started off this season really well, but really was exposed in the last couple weeks, although they were against much stronger opponents. But because Minnesota has momentum in the past couple weeks, I think they're going to be able to keep that going this week, especially playing at home. So I have Minnesota winning at home over Maryland in Big Ten play. We're going to stay in the Big Ten for our next matchup. We have Wisconsin traveling to number 25 Purdue. We know what Purdue did. They absolutely dominated number 2 Iowa last week. I think part of that was Iowa was not as good as the number 2 team in the country, but still Purdue has played really well so far this season. Wisconsin is a team that most people are saying is one of the biggest disappointments so far in this season, and I think that's going to continue this week. Purdue is going to come off that big win of Iowa looking good again this week, and they're going to win at home. Purdue will win over Wisconsin in Big Ten play. Next, let's go to an interesting ACC matchup. We have unranked Clemson traveling to 23rd ranked Pittsburgh. You wouldn't think this at the beginning of the season, that of these two teams, Clemson would be the one unranked, but they have struggled all season. They struggled against Syracuse last week as well. Always seem to do just enough to pull off wins, but now they're coming against a Pittsburgh team that's rolling, that's in the top 25, and Clemson's going to struggle again this week to the point that I am going to give the edge to the ranked Pittsburgh Panthers in this one. I have 23rd ranked Pittsburgh winning at home over Clemson in ACC play. We're going to go back to the Mountain West, our second Mountain West matchup of this week. We have 22nd ranked and undefeated San Diego State traveling to Air Force. This should be another really good matchup. As I just mentioned, San Diego State's undefeated. Air Force only has 1 loss on the season. Air Force is playing at home, but San Diego State, I think, is a slightly better team. They really haven't had a lot of competition so far this year. I think they'll get good competition this week, but I think they'll have a little bit too much for Air Force. So I have San Diego State traveling on the road to Air Force and picking up the win in Mountain West play. Next, let's go to Notre Dame. USC traveling to Notre Dame this week. USC is a team that has struggled mightily. They fired a coach earlier in the season. They just haven't looked right the past 2 to 3 weeks. Notre Dame is a team that has continued to struggle, find ways to pull out small wins along the way. I think this is going to be a get-right game for Notre Dame. I think they're going to just dominate this pretty much from the beginning to the end. USC just doesn't have a whole lot to play for at this point. Because of that, I have Notre Dame winning at home over USC. Next, let's travel down to the SEC. We have LSU traveling to 12th ranked Ole Miss. We all know what's going on with LSU right now. Coach Orgeron is leaving at the end of the season. The question is, are the players going to quit on him for the remainder of the season, or are they going to find something to play for unity-wise without their coach? We know LSU had the big win against Florida last week. Florida, though, is kind of weaker than I think everybody anticipated. Ole Miss is coming off the big win against Tennessee last week, where all the trash got thrown off the field at the end. I think Ole Miss is just going to have too much for LSU this week. I have Ole Miss winning at home over LSU in SEC play. Next, let's go to the Pac-12. We have 10th ranked Oregon traveling to UCLA. I think this is going to be another interesting matchup this week. Oregon is still ranked number 10, but they really haven't looked that great so far this season. They struggled to win a couple games. UCLA is a team that you never know what you're going to get from week to week. They might lose to a team they shouldn't lose to, but then they'll win against a team they shouldn't win against. I think that second thing's going to happen this week, especially being the home team. I have an upset in this one. UCLA winning at home over 10th ranked Oregon in Pac-12 play. Next, let's go to the best Big 12 matchup of the week. We have number 8, Oklahoma State, traveling to Iowa State. Oklahoma State is another team that's been under the radar. They're undefeated. They've had some big wins. They've kind of dominated along the way. They had a great comeback win against Texas last week. Iowa State struggled at the beginning of the year. They seem to always struggle at the beginning of the year, but they always seem to turn things around once it turns into October. I think they're starting to find their groove a little bit, and again, I'm giving them the lean because they're the home team in this one. I have another upset in this game. I have Iowa State winning at home over 8th ranked Oklahoma State in Big 12 play. So finally, let's go to this week's Thursday night matchup, the matchup that I will be at. We have Florida Atlantic traveling to Charlotte in Conference USA play. Charlotte is a team that's looked pretty decent so far this year. They started off the season with a big win against Duke. It was their first win against a Power 5 opponent ever, I believe. Although Duke is not really a strong Power 5 team. But they're finding their groove in Conference USA play. They're looking pretty good. Florida Atlantic's not a bad team by any means, but I think Charlotte's just stronger across the board. So because of that, in this one, I'm picking Charlotte. Charlotte will win at home against Florida Atlantic in Conference USA play on Thursday night. So again, I'm excited to be at that game on Thursday night. I'll be heading off to Charlotte tomorrow morning, checking out a lot of fun things to do there. Obviously, I'll be writing my blog for that along the way that I'll be posting in a couple weeks. Next week, I'll still be in North Carolina, traveling to the Duke and Wake Forest game. That should be a fun matchup as well. Wake Forest is obviously one of the better teams so far this season, one of the biggest surprises in the ACC. So it should be a good week and a half in North Carolina. Follow along with me on the journey and go and enjoy this week's games. And we'll talk to you again next week.